Welcome to Learn the Word, the daily Bible teaching program of Calvary Chapel of Delta and Pastor Doug McLean. In today's program, Costly Ignorance Part 1, we're joining Pastor Doug in Judges 11 to begin to look at the tragic story of Jephthah. Here's Pastor Doug.
You've probably heard people say, what they don't know won't hurt them. That's not true. And this passage that's before us today shows us how costly ignorance can be. Judges chapter 11, verse 1. Now Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty man of valor, but he was the son of a harlot, and Gilead begot Jephthah. So Jephthah was from the eastern side of the Jordan River, from the area of the mountains of Gilead. In chapter 10, if you remember, the chapter concluded with a simple statement that the people of Ammon, who had been oppressing Israel for 18 years, gathered and encamped in Gilead. And perhaps some of the changes that had been taking place in Israel as the people were crying out to the Lord and turning their hearts again to the Lord, putting away their idols, that had gotten the attention of Ammon. And so after 18 years of oppression, they gathered together to launch an attack. And it was in that area of Gilead. Jephthah was from that area originally where the Ammonites were gathered to attack. Now notice he's called a mighty man of valor, a description only used here and to describe Gideon in Judges chapter 6 and verse 12. The only times in the book of Judges that men are called a mighty man or a man is called a mighty man of valor is here and in the case of Gideon. Now, that means he was a brave, strong warrior, and here we also learn that he had a very tough beginning. He was the son of a prostitute. And being the son of a prostitute, an illegitimate child, he was forbidden by the law of Israel to go into the tabernacle to worship with everyone else. In fact, Deuteronomy chapter 23 and verse 2 indicates that that would be the case to the 10th generation. So his descendants for 10 generations would not be able to go and worship with God's people. And he would have been looked down on socially and for no fault of his own. He had nothing to do with it. It was the case of his father and his relationship with a prostitute. Now, it seems as though his father had taken some steps to rectify Jephthah's situation. Look at verse 2. Gilead's wife bore sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You shall have no inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." Now, since his half-brothers drove him out, seeking to keep him from the inheritance, from any of their father's wealth, it must mean that Gilead had adopted him. For typically, this wouldn't be an issue. Typically, the son of a prostitute would have no inheritance whatsoever. So Gilead must have brought him in and made him part of the family. And later, we see Gilead's sons, through his wife, drove him out. So here's the picture. You have a man that was accepted by his father and rejected by his brothers. Accepted by his father, rejected by his brothers. Verse 3. Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob. A worthless man and worthless men banded together with Jephthah and went out raiding with him. Now Tob was east of Gilead in Syrian territory. And so as he was driven out of the land of Israel, he went into an area that was inhabited by unbelievers, that was filled with paganism. He was away from Israel, away from the Lord's people. And we'll see that this experience impacted him greatly. There were some good things that came from this experience, and there were some very bad things that came into his life through this experience. Now here we're told he became a leader of worthless men, or empty men, or you could say men that had no other purpose. These men were slowly gathered to him. He understood, Jephthah understood, what it was like to be thought of as worthless. He had had that experience personally. He knew what it was like to be rejected. And so the word here says that these men banded together with him. The word translated banded together is a word that was used for gathering, for collecting, for even gleaning from the field. It was a word that was used for a part of the harvesting process. And whenever you gather something from a field, it's typically because you have a purpose for it, that you see some value in it. So there's this sense that they found value and they found purpose in being with Jephthah. There were men that otherwise had no purpose, no value, but with Jephthah there, suddenly they found purpose. They found value in their lives as they went out with Jephthah, raiding with him. You know, there are many people in our world who have been rejected, who feel unloved, who are undervalued, who sense no purpose for their lives. And perhaps maybe even some of you today have been through that experience. If that's you, if you faced rejection, I want to encourage you to be very discerning. That you need to particularly be careful because there are people that will take advantage of that longing that you have for acceptance, for value, for purpose in your life. You know, God wants you to know that you're valuable to Him. That no matter how people have treated you, that He loves you and He has a purpose for your life. In fact, He paid a precious price to adopt you. He paid a price to give you an inheritance. I mean, He came to die for you so that you could be in His family. So He has a purpose. You're not worthless to the Lord at all. So men may reject you. And Jesus understands that. But God hasn't rejected you. And He even says, if you come to Him today, He won't cast you away. He won't reject you. Now, it seems as though through this time, Jephthah's relationship with the Lord developed. There's evidence of it. As you read on through this text, you'll see that Jephthah was a man that knew what the Lord had done for his people. He was a man who remembered the things that the Lord did for His people historically when no one else was remembering them. And it's interesting to note that in looking at Jephthah, he used the personal name of God, Jehovah, Yahweh, more than any of the other judges. That we'll see in chapters 11 and 12 that he uses the personal name of God 9 times. That's far more than any of the other judges. And so when we look at his life, one of the lessons you can learn from him is you can see how God kind of repurposed the relational rejection that he went through. You know, people rejected him, but God used that as a tool to develop something in Jephthah that was very unique, very precious. That he had, through that experience, he had a closer walk with the Lord. Everyone else said, "Get out of here." And that made him develop a closer walk with the Lord. He knew the Lord better because of the rejection that he had received from men. And he had a greater dependency on the Lord. You know, this can happen. I know I've been through it where it seems like people are walking away from you, and yet in those seasons, you draw nearer to the Lord. And you get to know Him more, and you get to depend on Him more. And it's one of the ways that so if you're being rejected right now or pushed away, draw near to the Lord. Allow Him to use this as a tool to develop your relationship with Him. Now, at the same time that there were good things that happened, there were consequences. There were some negative things that came into Jephthah's life from being away from God's people, being away from the assembly. We'll see it very clearly before this chapter ends. And I haven't ever seen anything good come out of people falling out of fellowship. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I haven't seen anything positive come up in somebody's life because they're not in church as they used to be. When you get out of fellowship, it affects you. So this is the background of Jephthah, and it kind of setting the scene for what happens next. Take a look at verse 4. It says, "It came to pass after a time that the people of Ammon made war against Israel. And so it was when the people of Ammon made war against Israel that the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. They said to Jephthah, "Come and be our commander, that we might fight against the people of Ammon." Now again, back in chapter 10, we were told that the children of Israel did evil in the Lord's sight. They forsook the Lord, they served other gods, even the gods of Ammon. And as a result, the Lord sold his people into the hand of Ammon. And the Ammonites came and they harassed and they oppressed Israel for 18 years until finally they cried out to the Lord and said, "God, help." But the Lord didn't immediately deliver them. He sent a message reminding them of what he had done for them historically, calling them out of their continued idolatry. They were asking him to help, in fact, while they were still holding on to their idols, and God called them on it. Let the idols that you've been serving deliver you. So Israel confessed their sin, put away their foreign gods, and began to serve the Lord. And then as they did that, suddenly Ammon comes to attack. So things got worse after they repented. And we're kind of picking back up into the story at this point, that after 18 years of oppression, the Ammonites launched this full-out military campaign. And when it happened, the leaders of Gilead realized they lacked leadership. And they didn't have anyone that was skilled that they could put in that position to lead a battle. And someone said, "Hey, how about Jephthah? How about Jephthah?" You see, he was a fighter. He had experience. He was the leader of fighters. He had somehow taken men that had no purpose, no value, and he had made them into a successful band of raiders. And he was the toughest guy they knew. So the crisis was the occasion that inspired them to remember the one they had rejected. The one that was accepted by the father, rejected by the brothers. Suddenly they go through a crisis and they remember their half-brother that they rejected. And they humbled themselves and sent Jephthah a message, an invitation to be their leader. Verse 7. So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Did you not hate me and expel me from my father's house? Have you come to me now when you are in distress?" He essentially answers, "You didn't want me before. And now that you're in trouble, you want me to help you?" Interesting, very similar to the way the Lord responded to his people back in chapter 10 when they were crying out and still holding on to their gods. And he said, "Well, why don't you let your gods help you?" So same kind of response here from Jephthah. Verse 8, and the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "That is why we have turned again to you now, that you may go with us and fight against the people of Ammon and be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "If you take me back home to fight against the people of Ammon, and the Lord delivers them to me," you might want to underline that, "the Lord delivers them to me, shall I be your head?" And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "The Lord will be a witness between us if we do not do according to your words." Then Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord in Mizpah. So they knew they hadn't treated him properly, so they offered him an opportunity not only to be restored, but even more than that, to be their leader. They were suggesting that they were making amends, that they were righting a wrong. But truly we know that it was all born out of their desperation for leadership. So Jephthah had a better understanding of the situation than they did. And we know that because in verse 9, Jephthah said, "If you take me home to fight, and the Lord delivers the Ammonites to me." See, he knew that their victory wasn't dependent on a man. They're thinking, we need a man. And Jephthah says, "Okay, I'll be the man, but if the Lord delivers it." In other words, what you really need is the Lord. They thought they needed Jephthah. He knew they needed the Lord. And he made it clear that if this happens, it's not me. It's the Lord. I hope you understand that today. You may think you might need someone to help you out of the difficulty that you're in. And the Lord may use someone to help you. But what you need, what I need, what we all need more than anything else is the Lord's help. He's the one from whom every good and perfect gift descends. Anything good we have in our life comes from the Lord. He gives us victory. He gives us the power to overcome. Paul said our sufficiency is in Him, not in ourselves. So remember, yeah, God might use a person, but it's the Lord at the end of the day. So everyone else can leave you. But if you have the Lord, you have more than enough. So Jephthah knew their need for the Lord, and he embraced the leadership role, took charge of the situation, and began to act on behalf of his people. Verse 12, now Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the people of Ammon, saying, what do you have against me that you have come to fight against me in my land? So Jephthah began by opening communication with Ammon's king. He was seeking to avoid war through negotiation. He sought to secure peace through diplomacy. He called their aggression into question. He was seeking to pursue peace with all men. He was trying to live peaceably with all men. And these things are to be commended. So remember this, a simple illustration that if you feel opposed or attacked or embattled, pick up the phone. Call that person. Send an email. Walk across the street. Say, hey, is everything okay between us? It's so easy today to do that. Send them a text. Can we talk? Do as much as you can do to establish communication before you start drawing up your battle lines. And that's what Jephthah did. He sent a message to the king of Ammon. Verse 13. And the king of the people of Ammon answered the messengers of Jephthah, because Israel took away my land when they came out of Egypt, from the Arnon as far as the Jabbok and to the Jordan, now therefore restore those lands peaceably. So according to the king of Ammon's understanding, he believed he was fighting for something that belonged to him. He was claiming that the land from the river Arnon, which is halfway up the Dead Sea, all the way up to the river Jabbok, which is halfway up the Jordan River between the Dead Sea and the Galilee. He said that was ours before Israel came up. That was ours. Before Israel came out of Egypt, it was ours. So from his perspective, he was looking for Israel to simply yield what they believed belonged to them. Now, we'll get into this a little bit more, but he was confused. He had an incorrect understanding. So by initiating the communication, Jephthah was able to discover what the king was thinking, and thus he was able to address the real issues. Verse 14. So Jephthah again sent messengers to the king of the people of Ammon and said to him, thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab, nor the land of the people of Ammon. For when Israel came up from Egypt, they walked through the wilderness as far as the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. Now, Jephthah began here to patiently correct the king of Ammon. The Lord had told them not to take the territory of Moab, Deuteronomy 2, verse 9. And according to Numbers 21:24, they didn't take any territory at all from the Ammonites. None at all. In fact, in Numbers 21:24, it says that their border was fortified. They went that far and they stopped. They didn't go into Ammon's territory at all. So here, Jephthah begins to give a history lesson and corrects this king's thinking. Again, good example for us. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 23 to 26, 2 Timothy 2, 23 to 26 tells us, but avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. And the servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be gentle to all, able to teach, patient, in humility correcting those in opposition, if God perhaps will grant them to repentance so that they may know the truth and that they may come to their senses, escaping the snare of the devil, having been taken captive by him to do their will. So Paul told Timothy, take your time, be patient, be gentle, teach them. And that's what Jephthah was doing, gently teaching, humbly correcting, seeking to help the king of Ammon see that he was missing some things. So he took that time to reason with him. He took time to give the king a different perspective. And he continued to recount what happened. Verse 17, he said, "Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, 'Please let me pass through your land.' But the king of Edom would not heed. And in like manner, they sent to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel remained in Kadesh. And they went along through the wilderness and bypassed the land of Edom and the land of Moab and came to the east side of the land of Moab and encamped on the other side of the Arnon, but they did not enter the border of Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab." His point here, historically, he says they respected the territory of other people. They respected that which was not their possession, that which God was not giving them. In fact, they went way out of their way to go around Edom and to Moab. And they did the same thing with the Amorites. Read on, look at verse 19. "Then Israel sent messengers to King Sihon, king of the Amorites, king of Heshbon. And Israel said to him, 'Please let us pass through your land into our place.' But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory. So Sihon gathered all his people together, encamped in Jahaz, and fought against Israel." So they made the same request of Sihon. They initially had no interest in Amorite territory. They just wanted to pass through. They just wanted to get to the land of promise. But Sihon, when he heard the offer, instead of accepting it, he rejected it and he started a fight, a battle against Israel. And that's not what Israel was seeking. Verse 21, "And the Lord God of Israel delivered Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. Thus Israel gained possession of all the land of the Amorites who inhabited the country. They took possession of all the territory of the Amorites from the Arnon to the Jabbok and from the wilderness to the Jordan. And now the Lord God of Israel has dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel." And then he says to the king of Ammon, "Should you then possess it?" So it's close. Ammonites, Amorites, two different people. So this territory that the king of Ammon was claiming never belonged to them. Never did. It was where the Amorites were living. It was Sihon's territory. And they're the ones that started the fight with Israel. And the Lord delivered the victory to Israel. So it was Israel's territory by conquest. So again, Jephthah's point was the Ammonites had no right to fight for it. No right. So when you're watching the news and you're hearing a struggle about the land, whose it is, who has a right to live there, and they're negotiating and fighting over it, realize that Israel's enemies today are just as confused as they were in times past, thinking they have some right to it when history says otherwise. It's the same old story. Now, after laying this out, Jephthah said in verse 24, "Will you not possess whatever Chemosh, your God, gives you to possess? So whatever the Lord our God takes possession of before us, we will possess." So this was a challenge here to the king of the Ammonites, not of skill or strength or military might. He was saying, look, we simply took what the Lord our God gave us. And so you should be content with what your God gives you. Not that he was acknowledging the reality of their God, but rather kind of pointing to the impotence of their God and calling him out. He was challenging Ammon's false god. Verse 25, "And now, are you any better than Balak, the son of Zippor, the king of Moab? Did he ever strive against Israel? Did he ever fight against them?" And Jephthah really knew the word, didn't he? He was able to go back into history and recount these things. Numbers 22 to 25, you'll see that Balak feared Israel and never chose to initiate a fight against Israel. He tried to hire Balaam to come and curse Israel. It was an unsuccessful attempt. But he was unable to stop what the Lord was doing. So Jephthah is saying to the king of the Ammonites, remember history. Remember what Balak tried to do. Never really had enough guts to launch a battle against him. Verse 26, he said, while Israel dwelt in Heshbon and in the villages of Aroer and its villages and in all the cities along the banks of the Arnon for 300 years, why did you not recover them within that time? So this conquest that he's been describing happened 300 years before, under Moses' leadership, before Moses even died. And so Jephthah's saying, look, why did you wait so long if you felt like you had a legitimate claim to this territory?
You've been listening to the message, Costly Ignorance, from Judges 11 and 12. If you'd like to hear this message again, or listen to more from Pastor Doug, you can find it on the official Calvary Chapel of Delta mobile app. Just search for CC Delta in your app store to download it today. And be sure to join us next time to continue to learn the Word.